Hello and welcome. You're watching India Matters. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. The big story this evening on the show is nature's fury. In Tharali village in Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand, it has been struck by a devastating cloudburst. Rescue operations are currently underway. And that on your screens, the visuals tell you exactly what has happened in the last couple of hours. Some of these the devastation that actually took place because of the cloudburst is right there for all of you to see, viewers. It was just a matter of seconds in which there was a cloudburst, and what followed was the flash floods, and with it, it swept villages, and many people are missing right now. The death toll stands at 2, but what you're looking right now indicates that it could be far more. What it will be is something that we will report responsibly only when it's officially confirmed. What we do know is that there's been teams of NDRF that have been put there, and rescue operations are currently underway as well. What makes this entire operation also tough is because of the slush that has come in, which makes entire operation that much more tricky, that much more challenging. Add to it the topography and the fact that even now there is a red alert and the situation is far from normal. In fact, let me now take you through specific videos that tell you what all has happened in terms of the devastation of Devbhoomi, which is our top focus on India Matters. Video after video show absolute destruction in Uttarkashi. Take a look at some of these most devastating images that are there for you, viewers, to really understand the extent of what has unfolded in Uttarkashi. The first video that we're putting out right now is the true and horrifying extent of the cloudburst. Big concrete houses completely swallowed by the slush. The flash flood swept away a huge area of the Tharali village. There you can see that people had seconds to escape. So whoever could manage to did. But the video tells you just how difficult it would have been for many people to escape from that tragedy. The true extent of that is what you see on your screens. Let's get you the second video that tells you exactly the extent of nature's fury in Uttarakhand today, in Uttarkashi. The second video, this is the moment when tragedy struck the village in Uttarkashi. This new video shows water and slush gushing through the mountain, ravaging everything on its way. You see that. This is the terrifying seconds that tell you what really happened in terms of the tragedy when it struck today in Uttarkashi. Let's tell you this third video, another one that tells you the shattering aftermath of the flash floods, where homes upon homes have been swept away and buried in slush. That's the third video that tells you that what happens after these flash floods, which is the slush, which is equally challenging. You can see people, property, everything being taken away when the slush has actually come and swept away with it homes and people's lives completely. Now, in this video, you can see how difficult and challenging would the rescue operation be. It is currently underway. Emergency helplines are there. We're going to flash that out as well on our screens, viewers. Emergency helplines are put out. Emergency forces in terms of rescue and relief operations are underway. But this slush on your screens tells you how difficult and challenging that operation is right now. Another disturbing video, let's put that out as well on India Matters, which is a car being swept away. Locals claim the passengers were stuck in the car. That tells you that how that whether it is possible to actually be able to survive in such a challenging environment. That car being washed away is probably telling you exactly how things are unfolding or did unfold earlier today when that disaster struck Uttarkashi. Over 50 people are missing right now. They've been reported missing in the flash floods. Till now, the death toll stands at 4. We are waiting for details as far as those missing people are concerned. The final video that we're putting out right now, viewers, the army camp at Arshil has also been hit by the cloudburst. Images accessed exclusively by NDTV show the camp that has been surrounded by slush. At least 150 army personnel from this camp were one of the first responders as they rush to the rescue of those who've been trapped. That tells you how much of slush actually came down, and that's a question we're going to put out as well on the broadcast, which is that the big questions that we're going to put out, which is that what happens when such a situation actually unfolds? What is the kind of challenges it throws in terms of the rescue and relief operations? We'll put that out as well on our panelists. Will decode what could be the next 24 and 48 hours. But first up, I want to play out this report, viewers, that tells you the story so far.
Nature's fury in full force. Death and devastation in Devbhoomi. A village washed away. Houses crumble in the face of raging waters. Screams and shouts of people running to save life. As a cloudburst triggered devastating flash floods in Dharali village in Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand, multiple videos captured the scale and horror of the tragedy. This video shows the gushing water in full force, destroying everything in its way. Houses to cars to trees. Scared people scrambling to escape the advancing fury. Another video showed the sudden gush of water from the heights onto the unsuspecting village, sweeping all in the way with full force. An eyewitness documented the aftermath of nature's fury. Houses, cars, everything buried under the slush left behind by the flash floods. This video shows a man trying to navigate his way through the slush, falling in the effort. The cloudburst took place in the catchment area of the Kheer Ganga river, leading to the devastation of Dharali village in Uttarkashi. The area is just 4 kilometers from the Harshil army camp, which was also washed away. The mammoth tragedy overwhelmed the region and triggered an emergency multi-agency response.
सेना के लोग और आपदा प्रबंधन विभाग और NDRF, SDRF सभी काम कर रहे हैं। आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी लगातार हर संभव सहायता के लिए वहाँ पर NDTV की कंपनियां और कंपनियों को भेजा है। बचाव के काम के लिए थोड़ा सा कठिन स्थान है वो, क्योंकि वहाँ पर बारिश भी हो रही है और इस समय वहाँ थोड़ा कोहरा भी लगा हुआ है।
Teams of Army, NDRF, SDRF were rushed to the affected areas for rescue operation. A bridge leading to the affected also came down, snapping the connectivity and weather hampered the relief operations.
पुलिया भी वहाँ से बह गई है, तो उसके लिए हम लोग अभी BRO से भी और ENC इंजीनियर इन चीफ हमारे PWD के हमारे साथ हैं। मौसम भी अभी इस ऐसी स्थिति नहीं है जिससे कि हम लोग हेली सर्विसेज को वहाँ के माध्यम से वहाँ पे राहत और रेस्क्यू कर सके।
Prime Minister Modi expressed condolences and assured that relief and rescue operations were being carried out under the supervision of the state government. Home Minister Amit Shah also dialed the Chief Minister to take stock of the relief.
कि नदियों के किनारे जो लोग घर बना लेते हैं, उनका इंक्रोचमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा कर देते हैं, तो ऐसे में ये जो नुकसान होता है इस तरीके का बहुत ज़्यादा होता है। पर अभी किसी को पता नहीं है कि वो किस वजह से वहाँ पर फ्लड आया था। यही वजह है कि उस पूरे इलाके को खाली कराकर उनको सुरक्षित स्थानों पर लाया जाएगा।
Uttarakhand has been witnessing heavy continuous rainfall this season, with major rivers including the Ganga and Haridwar remaining in spate. NDTV Bureau Report.
Let's now play out the soundbite of Terry Gerwal MP on how things are unfolding right now as far as the aftermath of the tragedy that struck Uttarkashi. Listen in.
देखिए, बहुत ही दुख की घटना हुई उत्तरकाशी में, जो 2013 में भी एक बार आया था। इस बार उससे भी ज़्यादा भयंकर है। बहुत ही दुख की घटना हुई है। प्रशासन लोग अपने काम कर रहे हैं, जगह जगह पहुंच रहे हैं, क्योंकि रास्ता भी बंद है, इसलिए जितना वहाँ लोकली है वो लोग पहुंच रहे हैं, और जो बाहर से आ रहे हैं हेल्प कर रहे हैं, जो प्रशासन वो लोग अभी पहुंच ही रहे हैं। क्योंकि आपने देखा होगा परिस्थिति कैसा है। स्टेट और सेंटर हम सब मिलकर इसके लिए काम कर रहे हैं और आगे जा रहे हैं।
All right, breaking news coming in on the broadcast on India Matters. Chief Minister Pushkar Dhami has taken charge in terms of disaster response. He's reached the state center in terms of where the operations are being monitored in Dehradun. He's reviewing the rescue operations right now and the efforts after the cloudburst struck Uttarkashi today in the afternoon. Top officials are briefing the Chief Minister right now on the ground situation. What is the latest in terms of the relief and rescue operation? Remember, it's a very challenging task. We've been telling out and showing you those videos, those images that tell you that the relief and rescue operation itself is going to be extremely challenging in the wake of the slush that is there and the fact that there are a very large number of people who are actually missing. Those videos tell you that in a matter of minutes, people had no chance and had to in fact vacate to ensure that they did not come in the way of that massive flash flood that came in. And now there is relief and rescue operations that are being very closely monitored by the Chief Minister and he's at the Emergency Operations Center. And there's an expectation that over the course of the next couple of hours, hopefully there will be some clarity as far as those who are reportedly missing. All right, viewers, as we keep getting you live details and updates in terms of how things are unfolding right now, rescue and relief operations, let's quickly now tell you why is it that Uttarkashi is so vulnerable. This isn't the first time there has been such an incident that has happened. In fact, 2013 is when those devastating floods actually came in Uttarakhand, that was in the Kedarnath area. And since in the last decade or so, Uttarkashi continues to remain extremely vulnerable. Let's put out those basic points that tell you why is it that this area remains so vulnerable. First and foremost, which is the point is that deforestation weakens the soil stability, of course. So this is something, and that's the classic development versus ecology debate. Where do you draw that fine line is something that public policy is all about. Well, unregulated construction is another aspect which has worsened the entire flood impact. We've seen a lot of rampant construction that has taken place around the floodplains, and that complicates matters because that is when flood impact is worse. The other important part is the terrain factor, which is that steep and rugged terrain leads to water actually rushing very rapidly, and that makes matters worse. It aggravates the particular situation, whether it is in terms of the flash flood. This terrain needs to be kept in mind. The air rises quicker in mountains that causes very sudden and intense rainfall. Remember, this is what cloudburst is all about, which is that there's a very high and rapid intensity as far as rainfall is concerned, and that leads to flash floods. And because air rises very quickly in the mountains, this compounds matter. So these are really the broad issues as far as why Uttarkashi remains extremely vulnerable. Now let's put out those big questions that NDTV has been asking in terms of why, while we continue to focus on the tragedy, these big questions need to be asked. First and foremost, did the cloudburst sensors function today? There's been an elaborate system that has been put in place. Did it work today? That's the first question. The next key question that we are asking is, why didn't the forewarning system alert the Dharali village in time? You saw that video, viewers. The people in the village had seconds to escape. Why were they not given enough notice? What happened to that EWS, the early warning system that has been a major focus area in terms of priority? Next up, what is it that the data captured in terms of sensors before Uttarkashi cloudburst? Remember, as far as the entire system is concerned, it relies on data. You have accurate data, you put out the signals in time. What is it that the data mechanism was putting out? Next up, are these sensors actually operational, maintained? Basic question, but needs to be asked. At the end of the day, you may have an elaborate system, but is it working? Is it operating? Is it being maintained? That's the key question. And lastly, which is that, was there a flash flood alert given in time? That's equally important. And these are the questions that we'll try and get an answer to. Let's quickly now rope in guests joining me this evening on India Matters. First and foremost, Rajat Sen-Gupta, Associate Editor of Down to Earth, Shloka Nath, CEO of India Climate Collaborative, General Sanjay Kulkarni, Defense Analyst, someone who understands this area very well, and we also have Mr. Amitav Ghosh, who's the author and columnist, and also someone who understands environment very closely. In fact, Mr. Ghosh, let me start with you. Many would say, in terms of, and you're somebody who's tracked these environment tragedies that have unfolded in the region in the last 2 decades or so. You've studied this area very well, and many would say that probably not enough lessons have been learned so far. Everybody goes back in time to 2013, 2021 to repeat the fact that maybe enough lessons haven't been learned.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I was like everybody, everybody who's seen the footage. I was horrified by what happened. But you're absolutely right. Not only has nothing been learned from, other tragedies like this of the past, I think things have actually gotten worse. In fact, considerably worse. And, we can't blame it all on climate change. That's really the problem. Because often now you'll see ministers and politicians and so on saying, oh, it's all the fault of climate change. But it's not. It's really not. It's a fault of public policy. It's a fault of planning. I mean, when you look at those narrow mountain valleys, I've been on these pilgrimages myself several times, in fact, I can tell you. And those areas are not meant to be heavily trafficked. They're extremely fragile mountainous regions. And now, with the danger of climate change, we know that there will be more and more rain bomb events. And when rain bomb events happen, this is exactly what happens. You get a massive amount of rain coming down a steep valley, and the water has nowhere to go because the valley is a V-shaped valley, and the water will just run along the bottom of it. This isn't just the case in India. A similar thing happened in Pakistan recently, also in the United States. So we see this happening again and again, and yet there are no building restrictions, no regulations, more and more tourists being transported into this area. And really, it's a travesty, honestly, because, the whole point of the Himalayan pilgrimages was that they were difficult. I mean, I remember when I first went, to Kedarnath and Badrinath, as a 15-year-old, you would see people walking. That was the whole point of it. You had to suffer to get there. But now, the whole idea is that you just transport people in hundreds of thousands, but these mountains cannot take it.
Okay. Let me then come into the elaborate sensors, the early warning systems, all of which were put in place. In fact, even last year, the government and the entire administrative machinery was banking on this EWS, this early warning system. In your assessment, what went wrong there?
No. We cannot blame nature for all this. And the idea that there's a technological fix for this through sensors and early warning systems and so on, really, we can just do away with that completely. Because, the whole point of events like these is that they are completely unpredictable. They strike you where you don't expect them to strike. The problem really lies in building very low in the valleys, The problem lies, first of all, with deforestation upriver. Deforestation creates the conditions. I mean, if you've seen the water that came down that river, these used to be clear streams.
Yes.
But the water that came down was almost black. And that's because it just came surging down the hill, the mountainsides with no trees or forests to hold the landslides back. So this isn't just a flood; it's also, in some sense, a landslide. And where else is the water going to go but into that very steep valley? One thing that we don't adequately recognize, I think, is how incredibly fragile these mountain environments are. There are these rain bomb events when, of course, you get these flash floods. But there are also GLOFs, that is a glacial lake outburst phenomena, So we had that in Sikkim not long ago. Really, what we need to see is a deep retrenchment from building in these ways in the mountains.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Given how things stand right now in terms of, if one were to look ahead, one of course is the rescue relief operations, which will be the immediate priority of the government, of the administrative machinery. But Mr. Ghosh, if one were to look ahead in terms of the next key areas to focus on to ensure that a similar tragedy doesn't strike Uttarakhand again, what would be your key set of priorities?
I'm not an expert on this particular valley, on these particular mountains. But one thing I can tell you is that I am sure many local people would have predicted something like this. Because we see this in Joshimath with the crumbling houses and so on. Local people are very profoundly aware of their environments and their ecological constraints. So I would say very forcefully that what is needed is more consultation with the people who live there. The villagers who live there, the local people, and I'm sure they would have a great deal to say, and they would know much better, in fact, than outside experts.
Okay. Which brings me to ask you the one question. You mentioned deforestation right at the beginning of this interview, and that's something that many have been talking about. But sir, there is that fine line between development and ecology. Ecological concerns are very important, but so are development, right? So where do we actually draw that fine line between environment and development?
What does that mean? It's this absurd word, development. I mean, suppose building a fancy restaurant on the banks of a raging river is development, but then one day it'll come, the water will come, and it'll take away your restaurant and it'll take away your life. So how is that development? I mean, doesn't there have to be some sense of precautionary prudence in these matters?
All right, Mr. Ghosh, we leave it there. Thanks much for speaking to NDTV. Amitav Ghosh is someone who understands that area very well, and environment is a matter that's very close to his heart. In fact, let me take some of those points to the panel joining me, Rajit Sengupta, Shloka Nath, and General Sanjay Kulkarni. And as we talk, viewers, the focus will be on what lies ahead. Let's also not lose sight of the immediate, which is the relief and rescue operations. And General Kulkarni, let me start with you there. You know this area very well. You know the topography. You know the fact that after the flash flood, the entire operation from a rescue point of view is going to be extremely challenging. Walk our viewers through what is it that we are looking at over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours.
See, Gaurie, I'm from the Kumar regiment. So I know very well what exactly happens over there. The army, we'll have the ITBP, we'll have the NDRF, the SDRF, the BRO, all of them. Everybody will be working. That there is no denying the fact. Everybody will be, the rescue operation will have started. But the weather is a major challenge. It's still raining over there. The mudslides are very difficult to do. I have experienced one in 2010 in Ladakh, again in 2013 in Kargil. So I know what a cloudburst really means. But then it's a natural phenomenon. Whatever we might say, it's not so easy. None of our instruments can work. It isn't something like that which can tell us that there's going to be an earthquake tomorrow over here. Or if that was so, then the Russians would not have had an 8.8 earthquake on the Richter scale then. So it's not easy. These are natural phenomena because obviously the clouds are going from northward towards from the Bengal, Arabian Sea, what you were mentioning, the hot and the cold, all these kind of phenomena do occur. But what is more important is, you see the kind of development. The development is all quite new, in just about 5, 7, 8 years, because you can see the building, you can see the kind of things. We all have experienced it, what was a decade back to what it is today. We have to control them. That there is no denying the fact. You can see the values. Obviously, everybody seems to feel that for the last 10, 15 years, 30 years, which been it's all absolutely khali. Let's go and occupy it. The government gives you sanctions. Okay, construct this. You have this hotel coming up. You'll have this homestays coming up. Tourism developing, roads widening. Obviously, the trees get cut and in the bar. But these are all Himalayas. Absolutely new. Sedimentary. They are very solid. Tunnel making isn't easy over here. It could be very easy in Europe in the Alps, but it's extremely difficult and very, very difficult to retain and hold in the Himalayan region. So we all experience it. The mitigation is the only thing that we can do. But to say that we could prevent such a thing from happening, well, as of now, I can say it's virtually impossible. Virtually impossible. You can't prevent it. To say very easy climate change, it's not so easy. How can one predict? Would anybody be a fool if one could predict and not tell them? You would be the first one to tell them. And
Okay.
it's 1:45 a.m. during day. So thank God it's during day. People saw what was coming.
Okay.
And they could take, they could escape it. So some of them could escape from there. And therefore,
Right.
it's this massive construction which has led to this kind of devastation and loss of life. But otherwise, preventing such a phenomena, I think it's very, very difficult. It's still difficult. Cloudburst and all can't even be, you can't even sort of predict.
Eliminating may be difficult.
Difficult.
Eliminating may be difficult, but at least minimizing is what the effort should be towards. And how far we are able to do so is going to be a combination of some prudent public policy choices, but at the same time, tech intervention as well. And I think that is what I want to ask from both Rajit as well as Shloka, which is that everybody understands that when it comes to nature's fury, there is only so much that humanity can do. But where do we ensure that we are able to minimize some of this, either through technological innovations, tech interventions, as well as through ensuring that what General Kulkarni was saying, that you can't keep building rampantly. Highways are important, but where do you draw that fine line? You know, that road development, what General Kulkarni also mentioned about. And let's take that one by one. Rajit, to you first. In terms of technology, what is the first you think tech interventions can be done to minimize some of this? Nobody's saying we can eliminate all of it, but the effort should be to minimize or at least have some sort of a forewarning mechanism that ensures that humanity is not so unprepared as it was.
Thank you for having me over. So right now this is developing, so we don't know how the early warning systems actually work. So slightly speculative, but my experience over the past few years has been that IMD has made a lot of tremendous improvements in terms of how we are doing early warning systems. What we also need at the same time is basically a more robust community-led dissemination process as well, which I think is very important to minimize the damages that go along. So community has to be involved, and they have to be told beforehand that such a thing is going to happen. Like in this case, I know for the fact that IMD had predicted heavy rains. It did not predict cloudbursts, and IMD has also not said that cloudbursts have happened right now. It is the Uttarakhand government which has confirmed cloudbursts so far. So heavy rains was something that IMD had predicted at least 48 hours prior to today's event. But disseminating that information and also getting the movement on ground is also something that is needed.
All right, Shloka, come in there on several of these aspects that Rajit is mentioning.
So firstly, the idea that we have to choose between climate and development is actually a completely false binary, especially in a country like India, because development that ignores climate risk is not development at all. It's actually deferred disaster. What good is a road if it's going to get washed away every monsoon? What good is electricity if the village floods before it can even use it? So firstly, climate action is development when it protects lives, when it secures livelihoods, when it builds resilience for those who are most vulnerable and the people most exposed to climate risk, as we saw today. So we have to shift the question from how much can we build to what can we build that can withstand what's actually coming. Because if we continue to build without climate foresight, we're simply rebuilding more loss. The other thing that I do want to say is that, yes, of course, there are many, many solutions, but the biggest barrier isn't technology or funding, it's mindset. We still treat disasters as isolated events instead of symptoms of a much deeper climate crisis. That means that we're always reacting, we're rarely preparing.
Shloka, everybody is pointing out the pattern that has come in, the frequency with which you are seeing these flash floods in Uttarakhand. I think most people now are on the same page that this is not an isolated instance. You see now a pattern and the frightening frequency with which these flash floods are actually taking place.
Absolutely. And so for India, the next step is pretty clear. We need to mainstream climate risk into every single development decision, especially in places like the Himalayas. That means no new roads or infrastructure without a climate impact assessment. That means that we have to scale up early warning systems that actually reach remote villages, not just sit in government dashboards. And we must invest in restoring our natural defenses, forests, wetlands, slopes that can actually absorb water instead of triggering landslides. Some of this is already happening. We've seen successful slope stabilization projects in places like the Himachal and community-based watershed work in Sikkim. But we need to move from pilots to policy. The Himalayas are telling us exactly what they need. And the question is, are we listening?
No, you've raised some very important points, especially the one where you said that this is any development that doesn't keep climate action at its core is just a deferred disaster. That's the word that you used. And it's important to probably get some voices from the administration who right now, of course, are focused on the immediate. Viewers, let's understand, while we are talking about what happens in due course of time, one mustn't lose sight of the fact that as things stand right now, there are at least 50 people who are confirmed missing, and rescue relief operations are extremely challenging and currently underway. Helpline numbers on your screens. Let's quickly now tell our viewers in terms of why there's been a rise in cloudburst, and then we come back to our panelists here. Now, first and foremost, why is there increase in terms of the pattern that we're talking about cloudburst? First and foremost is climate change. It's triggered extremes in terms of what has happened in the last 20 years or 30 years. There's been a complete change as far as overall climatic patterns are concerned, and that has really played a major role as far as cloudbursts are concerned. Second important aspect, this is an ecologically fragile zone. This is the Himalayan belt. You cannot say Uttarakhand is separate, Himachal Pradesh is separate. All of it together are part of the Himalayan belt, which is extremely, extremely fragile from an ecological point of view. Third, equally important, which is that monsoon winds pack excess moisture, and that has an impact of how they actually get trapped, and which plays an important role in terms of the environmental conditions that lead to what really happens. And lastly, the narrow valleys actually in this region block the drainage, compounding matters. This partially explains in a way in terms of why this area is so susceptible to cloudbursts. We've been talking about how there's a frequency with which they are unfolding, and which is why there needs to be a greater action plan, so to say, an action plan for how Uttarakhand can deal with cloudbursts. And in fact, let's put that out as well, that how human activity has actually fueled some of this. We mentioned this, and our panelists are also mentioning, first and foremost, construction. Well, there's been rampant construction that has taken place. Tourism numbers have actually skyrocketed in the last 2 decades. A lot of this is to do with people wanting to travel, the ease with which they are traveling, and all of that adds to greater tourism infrastructure, all of which is needed. These are states, these are areas that rely heavily on tourism earnings, but at the same time ensuring that construction doesn't choke several of those natural drainage that exists and doesn't lead to the kind of rampant deforestation that some of the panelists were talking about. Trees gone, soil cannot hold rainwater anymore, slope stability weakened, and landslide risk up. That's explaining in a very simple way in terms of what really could happen. Climate change shifting monsoon patterns as well, with warmer air pushing more moisture into the hills and fragile ecosystem actually being pushed to the brink. That explains partially, as I said, this is a very complex phenomena, but this is for viewers to really understand how this ecosystem is so fragile and needs to be handled with care. Let's now go back to the panelists. Rajit, and let me ask you in terms of, we're putting out these pointers for our viewers to really understand how things are unraveling here. But at the same time, as I said, no chief minister, no government can ever say that, we need to develop more in terms of our tourism infrastructure. We need to ensure that development is prioritized. We need to ensure that roads and better connectivity is given to everybody. So what do you think should be the top 2 or 3 things that should be done from here on in the wake of this tragedy raising many red flags?
So one thing that I need to talk about is the fact that this is not one-off incident. So if I was just scrambling up the numbers just before coming to the show. So in the past 2 months in Uttarakhand, according to government data, around 42 people have died because of heavy rainfalls. So this is a chronic problem that is going around the year. What happens is when an incident like what has happened today unfolds, we are talking about it very emphatically. But development is a long-term process, and it has to be in a sustainable way. The other thing that is also equally important is that when we talk about climate change, we make it sound as if it is something that is beyond us. But climate change is basically an anthropogenic, human-induced change that is happening in the climatic scenarios. So it is basically the way we are developing and the way we are growing. That is at the heart of it. And we have to stop it, because we are talking about the immediate impacts right now. We're not talking about how many years would go into redeveloping the places that have been affected. If you go back to the previous landslides and extreme weather events that have happened, you can see that it takes years for people to rebuild their homes to where they come after a major extreme event. So we have to look at it in that prism as well. It is not just one-off incident.
General Kulkarni, come in there. How do we now view this from here on in terms of the next steps to ensure that red flags have been raised, concerns are there, but what can we possibly do from here on? As someone who understands that region very well, what would be your top 2-3 priority areas?
Gaurie, we all understand that this is a fragile ecosystem, requires a sustainable development. People have to earn, population is growing, and therefore there has to be a source that is a good tourist spot, very good. But tourists must be controlled. We must say so very clearly, not have miles and miles of vehicles lined up on the road. It should be specified that not more than 5,000 people will be here from this point to this point. And then an entry point and an exit point. So that continuously it is being monitored 365 days of the year. And not just during summer vacations or winter vacations, you find suddenly lakhs and lakhs of people turn up over there. Obviously, it's a very fragile ecosystem. The Himalayas, absolutely new. And therefore, since the mountain regions are so stable, it is very essential to control. And the control can only be done by the government. But you know how we people are. No, iska sifarish, uska sifarish, just getting to the area because he's got 3-4 days of leave, weekends coming up, just rushing up. It has to be controlled because this is something which we have to really come with a very, very hard path that these are the only area. This is the only thing that we are left with, and therefore it is our requirement to ensure it is safe. People should be safe. Rather than mitigating this, you can't. Yes, I can say forest fires can be controlled, landslides can be controlled, to a large extent, floods can be controlled. But cloudbursts and all things are very, very difficult. Earthquakes, extremely difficult to. But notwithstanding that, we know that these areas are prone to disaster, and therefore it is very important to control tourism and not making quick bucks in a short span of time. No, just sustainable tourism, yes, but very, very gradual, slowly, so that everybody enjoys rather than rushing 2 lakhs of people in a short span of time.
Shloka, do you think we can control the number of tourists who come to a tourist destination in India?
I think if we don't, we're looking at a rather dire future. And I think we have to stop talking about climate as a future threat. We have to start treating it as a present emergency. It has to be embedded in every single policy, every budget, every blueprint. It has to be as core as health, water, energy, food, housing. It's not distinct from any of these topics. And we have to move public perception from sacrifice to smart, safe, sustainable development. And that should hopefully answer the question around tourism, because climate isn't the cost of development. It's the condition for it to succeed. We need responsible tourism, not rampant tourism.
You come in there, Prajit, what do you think in terms of, this, what Shloka is saying, responsible tourism? But at the end of the day, how is it that you can actually implement something like this? Because tourists will come to a tourist destination, and connectivity, India has made huge progress in terms of our connectivity. Why is it that we will not see a greater number or a greater influx of tourists coming to tourist destinations like Uttarakhand?
I think it's an oversimplification. So let's assume after what happened today, the next few months, nobody is going to go to Uttarakhand for tourism purposes. This is the fear that is there, and we have to realize that. So we can't build hills the way our plains are built. And till the time we don't understand that, we won't not have a solution to this problem. So we have to think it in terms of that, so we can cap the number of tourists who are around. And it's not just about the number of tourists who are going. It's about the way the entire cities have been developed, how the infrastructure has come up. If you look at the videos that are coming up, you see these buildings that are being pushed out. And many of them, I'm assuming, would be also on the national drainage plains or on the slopes where they shouldn't have been there in the first place. So in hindsight, it becomes very difficult to give answers. But when development is actually happening, we know the basic things that need to be kept in place. And we need to redevelop it in a way that is sustainable. All
right, we leave it there. Thanks much, all three of you, for joining me on this edition of India Matters. As we've been pointing out, climate emergency is not something of the future. It is now a present concern that needs to be identified. Even as viewers, we continue a very close watch on how things are unfolding in terms of the rescue operations that are currently underway. The visuals on your screen tell you how scary and how devastating these flash floods have been today that struck Uttarkashi, and we're going to keep coming back to you with updates in terms of the rescue and relief efforts. On that note, a quick break. We come back with lots more on the other side of India Matters. Stay with us.